Hi everyone. In this video, I'm interviewing Dr. Danielle Merolla, a clinical psychologist and the Associate Director of the Center for Prevention and Outreach at Stony Brook University. Today, we're speaking about managing stress in college. Dr. Merolla, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, Jackson.
So stress is inevitable in college. At one point or another, every student is going to experience stress. But what are the best ways to manage stress so that it doesn't become consuming?
Great question. So stress is inevitable, period. So the thing first and foremost is we have to know when we are stressed. And I think this is actually a bigger issue than we would think. Oftentimes, we are not recognizing that we are stressed until we are, in fact, completely distressed and feeling overwhelmed by it, right? So first and foremost, it's really important. And what I often ask every student that I have the opportunity to speak to is to know what your baseline is. And what I mean by that is how you know yourself to be on a pretty decent day. So we're looking at things like eating, sleeping, mood, social media footprint. How do you know yourself to be on a pretty decent day? What do those things look like? We need to know that in order to know when we are starting to be stressed. At CPO, what we really focus on is the prevention piece. And that's a really important kind of prevention as it comes to the individual. We're looking at the community level, but as it relates to the individual, what does your stress look like? And once we could identify that, then the hope is that we are able to be aware of it or recognize it when it's starting. So I know that I need 8 hours of sleep at night, but there's a paper that I'm working on, there's various things going on, and in the last 2 days, maybe I only received 4 hours of sleep. This is off what I know for myself. That is a clear indication. Now I need to try to get that sleep back, right? So it is recognizing how stress impacts us, both in our body and in our mind. So our mind and body are intimately connected. So how does stress impact us physically? And then what are the cognitions sometimes that are associated with our stress? This is a lot easier said than done, but I will often also say thoughts only have the power in which we give them. Oftentimes when thoughts are coming in and they're increasing in duration, intensity, and perhaps even becoming more negative, that is a sign that you're stressed. What we tend to do when we're already struggling is we give those thoughts a lot more attention and they could be all consuming. But instead, recognizing those thoughts as a symptom that you are stressed is a really important thing. Recognition is number one. Responding to the second piece, I think what you're asking, is the various things that you identified as your baseline is at the very basic level, making sure those things are consistently being maintained over time. So like the measurable things, eating, sleeping, very, very important. Another thing that I stress for our Stony Brook students who work really, really hard, sometimes with unreasonable expectations, you also need to have times that you are scheduling breaks and that you're also scheduling time to just not think about work or anything else, but kind of have fun and engage with others.
Absolutely. So sometimes stress is persistent. The type of stress we were just talking about can be persistent and last for days, weeks, or months. Sometimes stress, though, can be set on by an immediate event, like only having so much time to finish your exam. So how can students remain calm in moments of immediate heightened stress?
It's a great question, and the very basic, simplistic answer is breathe. And I know we hear this a lot, but there is an actual biological basis for this. And so ultimately, when we are feeling stressed, anxious, any type of more intense emotion, we tend to breathe shallow. We tend to breathe over here. When we breathe shallow, it immediately impacts our nervous system that then tells our brain, we don't have enough oxygen here. There's a lot to fear. There's a lot to be concerned about. And then all of a sudden, our body and mind are now engaged in this kind of overactive process of sorts. So during those times, before walking into a test or an event, taking 3 deep diaphragmatic breaths, like breaths literally from like the belly up, then tells your brain, oh, I have enough oxygen, it's okay. So we're kind of working from the back end. Instead of the cognitions, it's relaxing the body in order to relax the mind. breath is so important, and you would be surprised how often in a day we are not breathing. Obviously, we're breathing, but we are breathing from up here. Just remembering to breathe and taking deep breaths is a huge way to help mitigate some of those in the moment stressors, anxiety experiences that you're speaking about.
That's great. So, are there any things, perhaps foods, substances, habits, or routines that students should avoid because they're known to increase stress?
Absolutely. I think the fact that you're using routine is important. So I just want to highlight, I think routines are really helpful, especially as it relates to managing stress, and not just like how much we're studying and when, but again, similar to what I was saying before, what time am I going to bed? What time am I waking up? Your body's getting used to a certain routine. When am I eating? When am I taking my break? When am I adding exercise? The body has to move. Now more than ever, in this time where we're kind of sitting in place a lot more and behind screens, we have to be really intentional getting our body to move. In regards to things to avoid, I could get into the whole topic of how drugs and alcohol impact our experience, but very simply speaking, we know that drugs and alcohol can absolutely intensify the experience of stress, intensify depression, impact sleep really significantly. What I want to say about that too, if you notice your increase in using, the question is what's going on? Oftentimes when we are looking to change our conscious state, it means something in our conscious state feels intolerable. So this goes back to knowing our baseline, right? You would want to avoid not sleeping. You want to try to avoid eating things that aren't necessarily balanced. I don't want to say you should not eat this and eat. I usually say try to be balanced. So if, one day I decide I need to have like all of these munchkins in front of me, I want to make sure that later on that day, I have a fruit, I have a vegetable, like trying to balance it out. I'm not someone that believes in too much rigidity or extremes in one way, but a balanced diet is helpful. And the other thing is, it really depends on where your stress is coming from. Sometimes what we need to avoid is the media. Sometimes what we need to avoid is the news, is social media, right? So there are also times that I think, especially now, turning those things off can absolutely help balance our stress.
Great. So, just kind of to wrap up here, when stress becomes overwhelming and students feel that they can't manage it on their own, who can they reach out to for help? Are there people or resources on campus or perhaps online that they could use?
Absolutely. I really want to stress that we really, really encourage that students are reaching out sooner rather than later. Regardless, reach out whenever it is. But yes, there's absolutely supports on our campus that are more accessible, quite frankly, than what is accessible off campus. Some of those are that I like to point out is Let's Talk. So Let's Talk is basically counselors that are available to students for brief conversations. It's not therapy, but it's the ability to speak to a counselor about anything on your mind. When we were on campus, we were located in different places on campus. Now we are completely virtual. You could go to the virtual Let's Talk link, pick a time within the time frame in each day that Let's Talk is available, and then you get a private confidential link to speak with a counselor. That is a wonderful way to, first of all, early on, if you're finding you're starting to feel a little bit stressed, connect, speak to a counselor, but it's a wonderful way also to problem solve and work with that counselor to figure out, well, what do I need at this point in time? Because that counselor can also be a wonderful bridge to other resources and supports in our community.
Is Let's Talk available on multiple campuses, or is that only something available at Stony Brook currently?
Oh, good question. So Let's Talk actually originated probably about 13 years ago at Cornell University. And now I'm not sure of the actual number, but it's certainly on various other college campuses. We adopted Let's Talk probably around 4 years ago, but our efforts to really make sure our community is aware of it and it's available and accessible became very intentional about 3 years ago. And what I'm really pleased, I don't know, something about the virtual world, when we moved virtually, as we've seen, like some spaces are being utilized, some spaces aren't. We're all trying to figure out how do we connect during this time. Let's Talk is being utilized so much more. I'm so, so grateful for that. And it's been a lovely place where students are able to come and we could, sometimes that space is enough for students and sometimes there is bridges to other resources like our counseling and psychological services on campus, which is free and confidential to all students. like actually academic resources and supports and tutoring that we are aware of and will connect students to, like our student support team on campus, which is a fantastic resource. Our student support team out of the Dean of Students works with students with all sorts of things, academic, distress, financial, food insecurities, but are a wonderful support because sometimes what we need is just assistance, right? When we are overly stressed, even writing an email can be difficult. Something like student support team with Let's Talk are aimed to help students navigate during those times and also make sure we're supporting students during those times.
Great. Well, thanks again, Dr. Merolla, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Everyone take good care, be well, take good care.
If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And for more interviews like this, please subscribe. Have a great day, everyone.